What is up, guys? It's Orca Flop, and today I'm coming at you with another video, and today we are going to be back at it with another IMSA review. This is the 2019 Mobil 1 Sports Car Grand Prix at Canadian Tire race review. This race took place today. It was 1 week after the 6 Hours of the Glen, no 2-week break this time around, and the 6 Hours of the Glen was won by the number 55 Mazda, and it was Mazda's first win in IMSA in a while, at least in the DPI category, in the prototype category in general. So it kick-started what seems to be a bit of a landslide in a positive way for Mazda. And the race, the pole sitter for the race was supposed to be Colin Brown, but we'll get into that later on. But without further ado, that was a little preview going into the weekend. A bit different way to start one of these race reviews, but why not? Anyway, let's get right into the Canadian Mobil 1 Sports Car Grand Prix at Canadian Tire. So, here we go. The race started off with Helio Castroneves and Jonathan Bomarito on the front row. Colin Brown did win the pole in the Core Autosport Nissan DPI, but unfortunately they were mired to the back because they decided to change tires and make John Bennett be the first in rather than Colin Brown, which in hindsight is a stupid decision because of the fact that you don't want to. Track position is key in sports car racing, and if you don't have that track position, you're not going to be able to maneuver or get anywhere with that. So that was not a very good start off for Core Autosport and Nissan to the race. But the race kicked off. Helio Castroneves got the initial start over Jonathan Bomarito and took the early lead as there were battles mid-pack. Felipe Nasser tried to get around Juan Pablo Montoya in the very beginning, but Montoya ended up passing him back. Oliver Jarvis started off the stint in the number 77 Mazda DPI. He was able to make his way up to third, getting around Juan Pablo Montoya. And over in the GTLM category, the BMW sweep the front row. The number 24 BMW of Jesse Krohn led the early path as he got an excellent initial start and took off at the first part of the race with Ryan. I almost said Chase Briscoe. With Ryan Briscoe following suit in the number 67 Ford GT with the Lamar paint on it. The number 25 BMW of Tom Bloomquist did not get that great of an initial start. He ended up falling back to fifth as the two Porsches passed him up. Later in the races. Also, the two Porsches passed up Ryan Briscoe for second and third. It was the 911 of Patrick Piele ahead of Lawrence Vanthor, who was arguably the best driver at Porsche. Corvette Racing struggled at the beginning of the race. They were split by Dirk Mullen, the number 66 Ford GT. It was Jan Madison ahead of both him and Marcel Fassler. As you know, Tommy Milner didn't get the first stint due to the fact that Tommy Milner was injured after his crash at Watkins Glen, so that made them have to resort to Marcel Fassler, who's usually their endurance driver, to take that spot. And over the GT Daytona class, Robbie Foley got the pole in the Turner Motorsport BMW. He took off greatly and sailed to the lead, with Trent Hinman following suit and Ben Keating in third until Ben Keating unfortunately spun out in, I believe, turn 5. I don't know what it was. I think he got hit by someone. I don't remember what it was, but Ben Keating in the number 33 Mercedes spun out in that turn and ended up being behind the number 44 Lamborghini the majority of the race. As the race continued, Jonathan Bomarito ended up using the GT Daytona traffic to overtake Helio Castroneves for the lead and control the majority of the DPI class and the overall field. Oliver Jarvis was looking right behind Helio Castroneves, doing whatever, or not Oliver Jarvis, Tristan Nunez, who started in the 77. I'm stupid. I believe it was. I don't remember. Was it Jarvis or Nunez? I think it was Nunez. That was starting in the 77, and he tried to get by Helio Castroneves. Unfortunately, couldn't. Helio Castroneves still his ground, and nothing really happened. I know Will Owen, the number 50 Hunkos Racing Cadillac, hit the number 74 Mercedes, and they had a spin in the turn. So that was very unfortunate for them. That ended up costing number 50 Hunkos Cadillac some time in the race, and the number 74 Mercedes ended up getting cost time too, but he was running in the back, so that team was struggling for the majority of the time. And then Trent Hinman in the number 86 Acura NSX, who is leading the points in GT Daytona right now, was able to catch up to the Turner Motorsport BMW of Robbie Foley and making it a very aggressive move in one of the tight corners, trying to get to the inside and sending it in, but ended up hitting the BMW, and it was very dramatic. It was a good battle for the lead. But then he ended up making contact with the BMW, and the BMW ended up having the straight line speed to hold the lead. And then the number 9 Porsche of Hargrove was able to catch up to Trent Hinman and try to challenge for that second spot. So GTD looked like it was ramping up to be a pretty good race. And then the pit cycle happened where you had the Mazdas, who had the best fuel mileage in the DPI class, stay out longer than the Acuras and the Cadillacs. Cadillac kind of struggled in this race. I don't think they were able to really find the pace that Mazda and Acura had throughout the majority of this race. So it was definitely a struggle for the Cadillac DPIs to try to keep up and overtake the Acuras and the Mazdas. So it was very interesting to seeing as how Cadillac for, I'd say, 2 years in a row now has kind of dominated the DPI class. So finally, Mazda Team Yost and Acura Team Penske have been battling this entire race, and they kind of dominated the front row of DPI. GTLM, during this pit cycle, Earl Bamber hopped into the 912 Porsches. He pitted a couple, 5 laps earlier than the number 24 BMW Jesse Krohn. And they pitted later, and then so did the 911 Porsche Patrick Pilet. Nick Tandy ended up hopping in the 911. And that pit strategy by the 912, great call by the crew chief, that ended up making Earl Bamber cycle out as the leader, and John Edwards in the number 24 BMW second, and then Nick Tandy third in the number 911 Porsche. So that was your top 3 in GTLM. GTD did not change that much through the cycle. It was Bill Alberlin that hopped in the number 96 BMW, who the broadcast mentioned that that he was closing into Scott Pruitt as for all-time class wins. As Scott Pruitt, I think, has 60 or 59. I can't remember. One of the two. And then going into this race, Bill Alberlin had 53 class wins ahead of Lucas Lohr, who had, I think, 50 or 49, one of those two. So it was kind of a very interesting story going into it, and it was very nice to see. So, albeit at that, and the rest of this race kind of played out naturally. We went a long stint without getting a caution. And then in the middle of this part of the race, the number 14 Lexus of Jack Hawksworth ended up hitting the number 73 Porsche Patrick Long on pit road, and that cost him some damage. And then later on in the race, he hit Hargrove in the right rear and ended up spinning out the 9 Porsche, as he also suffered some damage to the left front of that Lexus RCF. So he had to go back into pit road. And Ambassador Sullivan that's not what they wanted to see, seeing as how they're trailing right behind Meyershank Racing, those Acuras, for the championship. So that's definitely something they didn't want to see. And then the rest of this race was kind of a dominance by Mazda, as they cycled out, and Oliver Jarvis passed Ricky Taylor in the number seven Acura Team Penske Cadillac Acura DPI. And then it was Mazda 1-2, looked very similar to the Glen, because the 55 was leading, the 77 was second. So me being a Mazda Team Yost fan, I was very happy. And then the cycle continued. Antonio Garcia hopped in the 3 Corvette. Corvette Racing struggled throughout this entire race. I don't know if they just weren't able to find the speed, especially the number 4. I feel like, in a way, Marcel Fassler was holding them back because of the fact that Marcel Fassler is mainly the endurance driver. He doesn't have much experience in the sprint races. So I can see why Marcel Fassler maybe struggled a bit. Antonio Garcia and Madison, I guess, couldn't get the grip of the car, as Dirk Muller ended up passing both Corvettes, and the Corvettes were second to last and last this rest of the race. And nothing much happened. The 55 Mazda continued to lead. And then the caution came out, but I do believe to a collision due to Philippe Albuquerque and Ricky Taylor hitting each other, I want to say it was. And that brought out the yellow because there was debris on the track, and it was a pretty lengthy yellow, and it went on for a while. The number 77 Mazda of Oliver Jarvis took the lead from the number 55 of Harry Tinknell on this restart. So the number 77 Mazda went to the lead. The number 24 of John Edwards tried to challenge Earl Bamber in the 912 Porsche for the lead, but to no avail. And the number 96 BMW Turner ended up flying away, basically. And by the way, if you want to know why I'm not talking about LMP2, thought about making a video on LMP2 maybe during the IMSA offseason and why it was such a big mistake. So anyway, continuing on. And during this green flag stint, we had probably one of the nastiest wrecks in IMSA this season as Victor Franzoni was going into the carousel, and he ended up losing his steering, I think it was, and he ended up going full throttle into the tire barriers, and it was a really hard crash. That number 50 Cadillac was put out of its misery, and he hit those tire barriers at basically top speed and was buried in them for a while, so we ended up going red flag at 17 minutes left in the race because of his crash, and it was very unfortunate for that number 50 Hunkov's Cadillac. And thankfully, Victor Franzoni was okay after the wreck, and he suffered no injuries. I thought some people were saying he suffered a broken leg and a broken wrist, but it turns out that wasn't true. He was okay. He just had to be lifted in an ambulance for obvious reasons. I'm really glad to see that he was okay, because it's not often in IMSA where you see a DPI lose steering like that or lose brakes and go full on into a tire barrier. I think we saw it at Road Atlanta in 2017, but that was the last time I thought that I saw like a tire barrier hit be that bad. I think it was a Nissan DPI, if I'm correct. I hit the tire barrier at Petit Le Mans in 2017. But I haven't seen a wreck like that in a while. Well, the Spirit of Daytona Cadillac in the 12 Hours of Sebring in 2018 also hit the tire barrier. It seems to be a common issue where the DPIs will understeer and unfortunately have these really hard crashes. So we hope not to see crashes like this anymore, because we're lucky Victor Franzoni was okay after this, as that was a massive hit to the tire barrier, and it definitely costed him to get lifted into the ambulance. So that was not good. And it makes us question the safety of the IMSA cars, as obviously we know for a long time now that IMSA cars are mainly regulated by certain chassis makers, and they're not really driven on safety rather than speed and marketability. Because you could say this for GT cars as well. They wanted to make it look like a stock car and make it naturally aspirated to the street car they have selling as a product for everyday licensing. So I think ultimately but I can't really say anything about safety in IMSA. They do have the Hans device and the helmets, but I just think the way that the DPIs are designed, and maybe some other cars like the GT cars have ended up making things a bit unsafe in IMSA and costing drivers injuries. Because you look at Tommy Milner, that wreck didn't look that severe, and granted, Watkins Glen doesn't have safer barriers, but still, Tommy Miller didn't look like to have that much of a wreck, and Tommy Miller ended up breaking a finger in that wreck at Watkins Glen. So, and Marcel Fassler at Le Mans as well. I know both of these are Corvette related, the same Corvette too, but you look at Le Mans when Marcel Fassler ended up crashing really hard into the side wall and ended up having to get lifted into an ambulance as well. I guess it's maybe just an issue with the cars themselves and the way they're designed, because IMSA has the Hans device and closed face helmets, but it brings up the question now. A lot of these drivers have been getting hurt, especially as of recent, so I don't know if there's anything IMSA could do to necessarily make it safer. Maybe the walls, put tire barriers just about everywhere. Watkins Glen, again, has that common issue where it has guardrails rather than like actual safe walls. But I don't know. I've been thinking about it. It's making me question it, so I had to think of something in order to say, because safety in IMSA, it seems like, is being a bit questionable now due to these recent injuries. Anyway, so after that, we went green again. The number 77 Mazda of Oliver Jarvis launched to the green flag, and Oliver Jarvis dominated the rest of this race as Harry Tincknell tried to hold off a very fast Dane Cameron in the number 6 Acura Team Penske, as I believe he was able to just manage his tires better. And the number 77 Mazda of Oliver Jarvis came home with the overall victory in DPI. Let's go. Hell yeah. man, the reason I'm so happy for Mazda and Yost, they've worked so hard, and they've kind of been stereotyped to have these reliability issues. I mean, you look back at the Rolex 24, Sebring, and many others where Mazda had the dominant car and then choked up. It's great to see Mazda now get 2 victories in a row. Granted, the 55 won at the Glen last week, and the 77 won this week, but I feel like the 77 deserved a win more than the 55. So awesome to see Oliver Jarvis bring it home to the victory in DPI, and congrats to Mazda and Team Yost on winning their second DPI victory this season. That will definitely help them in points. LMP2, who cares? You can look that up yourself. I don't want to talk about it. GTLM, Porsche gets 5 wins in a row with the 912 Porsche of Earl Bamber and Lawrence Vanther getting their 3rd win of the season, as they've won now Long Beach, Mid-Ohio, and now Canadian Tire. So Porsche gets 5 wins in a row as the 911 won Sebring, Detroit, and yeah, that was it. Sebring and Detroit that the 911 won. The other 3 were by the 912. So that was awesome. I actually, like, being a Corvette fan, I'm disappointed because Corvette Racing had a terrible performance today. Ford did decent. They were up there in the early goings, but then ended up falling off. BMW had a those Rahal Letterman Langen BMWs definitely went out there and proved something today. They were fast all day long. John Edwards finished 2nd. Right behind Earl Bamber. So great drive by the number 24 BMW. I'm sure that's something to boost their confidence, even after they won the Rolex 24. So it's definitely something I think BMW was long awaited for. And this is the last time Porsche is going to be running the Brumos livery this season. So it's nice to see Porsche at least win the Brumos livery. That's pretty awesome. And congrats to Bamber and Vanthoor for getting their 3rd win of the season. And then in GT Daytona, the absolute dominance by Turner Motorsport BMW, the number 96. And Bill Alberlin now has 54 career class wins, closing in on that record that is set by Scott Pruitt. Bill Alberlin is becoming one of the more underrated GT3 drivers, in my opinion. I think Turner needed that, and BMW needed that win to get a bit of a confidence booster, because it seemed like that BMW M6 GT3 car was very slow. But they went out there to Canada today and dominated, so I'm sure that's going to be a huge confidence booster with the win, and congrats to Turner Motorsport and BMW. But in all reality standards, In all reality standards, I would say this race gets a 5.5 out of 10. It was an okay race. There were some battles here and there that got entertaining. Again, you had that scary crash with Victor Franzoni. That kind of set the mood into things. But it was an okay race at best. It was like Detroit. I think the 2 best races this season have been Mid-Ohio and Long Beach. Long Beach being number 1, Mid-Ohio being number 2. It was an okay race. You had some passing. Not all the classes, honestly, were that competitive. I think that's because of the sheer difference in the tire wear at Canadian Tire. You have to really manage your tires Canadian Tire, and that sets in more strategy rather than back-to-back action passing. So this race gets a solid 5.5 out of 10. Congrats to Mazda Team Yost. Fuck yeah, the 77 won. And congrats to the Porsche Motorsport in the 912 winning. And the number 96 Turner Motorsport BMW M6. Now, in 2 weeks, we are heading to Lime Rock Park. Without a doubt, one of my favorite tracks on the schedule. It always produces on a pretty good race. It's short, and it's got beating and banging. Lime Rock is an awesome track. It's only going to be the GT cars, so the GT cars will try to be going for an overall victory. It's going to be GTLM and GT Daytona, so that's going to be real fun. I can't wait for that. So, I can't wait for Lime Rock Park. It's going to be very fun. And I hope you guys like this race. And let me know what you guys think in the comments section. And I'll see you in the next one. Go Mazda Team Yost. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.